Gamescom partnered up with Australia this year, and that made us open indies curious. What indies are there in Australia, and what are they currently working on? One of them is Blowfish Studios, and I'm now here with Ben Lee. He's the co-founder of the studio. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. Hope you're doing good, too.
Yep. And nice end of the day here for me. I know it's really the start of the day for you.
Yeah, that's true. First question. Describe a scene from your upcoming game. It's called Phantom Galaxies, and it's like this open-world space simulator, right?
Yeah, so it's actually open-world space sim combat with like transforming mechs. And so, you're a pilot, so they're piloted. So you play as a character, and you get to pilot what we call starfighters. They have like the spaceship form and the mech form, and you're really one of the scenes is you kind of in space, and you have like space pirates as you do, and you take a mission from one of the space stations in your character, and then you go out into the world and you track them down and you through a mission, and then you get into like combat, right? Space combat, and where you're piloting your spaceship using your weapons and your arsenal, and you're trying to defeat them. You get to that kind of that moment where you need that special bit of extra power, and you can transform into a giant fighting mecha. And then you get extra, access to different kind of abilities and weapons like video rockets and things like that, and you get to take them down. The third person viewpoint over the shoulder, in both forms, and that's kind of harking back to one of the big inspirations was Robotech Macross style battles and fights, and a bit of the obviously the Transformers thrown in there too, Gen 1. So kind of this is like a audio kind of podcast, but in my office in the background I've got like a bookshelf full of Robotech and Transformer toys, which is obviously great for me to play around with.
Yeah, awesome. Second question, like your game Phantom Galaxies, it will also allow players to purchase NFTs. Why are you implementing that in your game?
Last year, we started getting into the blockchain NFTs and what that means for games. We are a traditional game developer. We've been making games for over 12 years now, starting in mobile, going through PC console. And one of the big things, I'm also a big game player. So love the old MMOs. Got started at EverQuest and got into World of Warcraft and a bit of EVE Online. And one of the things is, what the blockchain does let us do is to put the game items in the game world and things that your inventory and things that you are, your character even, and to put them onto the blockchain and have that kind of true digital asset ownership of them. And while we hear all different kind of arguments back and forth, pros and cons for it, still feel like it's a very interesting technology, like they call it Web3, so it's the internet. So essentially, once you have these NFTs, which might represent your kind of your big starfighter, your big mech that you've been working on for months, it's actually yours in your public wallet, and you can sell it if you want, or you can just hold it and build it up. But that it is always yours. So I think that's just what blockchain gaming is about. So and it's not like you can buy it off people, you can start off, but you're always still investing your time into it, right? So your play time, and so then it becomes kind of your valuable item in that sense as well.
Mm-hmm. So is there also some kind of marketplace then in the game?
Yeah, so I mean the great thing, like I said, about NFTs and the fact that it's Web3 is that while we do have our own marketplace in the game, the NFT is a standard. So we are building on the Polygon blockchain. But that means there's many kind of just public marketplaces out there. And so this is where the items are your own there as an individual, as a player. It's not restricted to just in the game. So we don't control that item in the game. You can sell it, an owner can sell it in any kind of marketplace. So it's like if you want to relate it to, say, World of Warcraft, where you've got your level 35 warrior, I could go to eBay and sell it on eBay. And whoever buys it on eBay, it just gets transferred and they own it. They don't need to talk to the game owner or developer at all, publisher. That player now owns that character. They can just come download World of Warcraft, jump in, and now they've got that level 35 warrior. So So yeah, while we do have our own marketplace, which is going to kind of theme to the game and give you better filtering, because the NFTs are a standard, you can really do what you want with it outside of the game as well.
And why did you want to have NFTs in your game? Just because you say it's interesting?
We did get acquired by an America Group last year, like 12 months ago, and they are fully, kind of focused on blockchain gaming and true digital asset ownership. But the reason why we did that is because we'd been looking into it, and it was something that I think to us is like the next evolution of gaming. It's not changing games per se; it doesn't change genres at all. What it does, it just kind of is it's a supporting technology for games, and so that's why for us especially, we're working on quite a number of games, but the games themselves, they're still follow the same game design as a typical traditional game. We're still about fun, still about the players, essentially rewarding playtime and the people, engagement with the game. But it's just cool how we can integrate NFTs and kind of there's a thing called proof of experience as well. And again, some people say, oh, we can do that with like a database. And look, you can, but that database is owned by the game. So but in this case, everything's on a blockchain, which is again Web3. No one essentially owns it and is out there, and so it's whether it has any real value to a particular person is up to that person. It's like I've got a toy. Like I love toys, so I've got a model that it's special to me, right? Like I used to have a Subaru WRX car, and I've got this like model of a WRX, and that to me is special because I place value on it, but someone else, they don't care, right? They just throw it in the bin. So it just allows people, to players to, if they decide to give value to something personally, then they can. I say trustless kind of. I guess it's just persistent and permanent digital items, digital assets. So I think it's pretty cool that I can send it wherever I want in the world. It's just all done through like the internet. Like the internet, no one asks, how does the internet work? It just works. And I can start a website here, and anyone can come visit it. And I think that's great. And that is why they call blockchain. They call it the Web3 standards and framework.
Yeah. All right. So it's just for the players, and that maybe players can make money from their creations. But do you get money from them as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the one kind of, I think is, which I found also, which was quite, I think it's a good thing for creators, for content creators, not just game developers, but for artists as well. So there are like creator royalties, which you can, put onto any asset. And in that way that the original creator gets a percentage of royalty of any ongoing sales. So I think that's great for creators, like even from a music or art perspective as well, where it's hard. And this has been pretty decades old kind of battle between digital music rights and stuff like that. Yeah, if you followed that, right? So artists don't really want to hand over their right, like their music, because once they've done it once and then they lose control of it essentially. So while it's not quite so simple yet, the solution around that, it is there, and it's also not enforced. So some of the marketplaces will let you have that creator royalty, but it's still possible for people just to transfer items around without having any kind of that secondary royalty as well. So it is just a good thing, and it's only possible because of the blockchain, because it is, when you create an NFT or an item, it is permanent and it's public about who created it, and you can never kind of wipe that away or erase that history. So any NFT you see, you can follow, even if it gets exchanged multiple times, millions of times between people, you can follow it all the way back to the very first time it was created, and you can see who created it. So that's another kind of feature of the blockchain which makes it possible.
Mm-hmm. All right. Third question: why do you call yourself Blowfish Studios?
You
have a Blowfish toy?
We get asked this quite a lot. I used to have like a aquarium, like a saltwater aquarium we used to look after. We had pufferfish in there, blowfish in there. When we were trying to come up with a name for the studio, for me or for most people, coming up with the names is one of the hardest things to do because you have, it's like unlimited options, right? It's like, oh, I can do this, or this, and but then you also care about what people think of that name. So it's pretty tough.
But I like the name.
No, I think it turned out well. So thank you about that. But I think people like that, and our logo has changed a couple of times. But now people really like our logo. We put it on T-shirts, and people actually want the T-shirts. Like, oh, they think it's well. So yeah.
Fourth question: how is Australia for indie developers? Like, what do you think is great, and where do you see room for improvement?
Right now, I think we're at the start of a really great time for indie development in Australia. Hasn't always been that way. It's been on and off. And when I say that, I'm talking about essentially support from the government and different government departments and the actual environment to build games in. So right now, we have many things which are very pro in development here in Australia. The exchange rate. Aussie dollar is very, very good level for exporting out to different parts of the world. So that's really strong. We have stable government, stable kind of social economic environment. That's really cool. But right now we also have a lot of government grants and funds that are really springing up around game development, both from a state government perspective and a federal government perspective. And these grants and tax rebates, there's ones that are focused at larger studios and larger developments. But there's also ones that are focused more at the smaller grants, so full kind of prototype or game funding, and that's like I said, both at the state and federal level. So you can get two different levels. I talk to a lot of game developers around the world, and so I know there are actually quite a few other places that have had this kind of support for a while. But Australia is doing really well now. I think catching up to them. So that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think still should be improved?
I think from a game development point of view, in that we we lost a lot of experienced game developers over the last years. I think when we had when there was a GFC and the Aussie dollars went up quite a lot, we lost a lot of experienced game developers overseas. We're actually seeing quite a few slowly coming back now. The pandemic was pretty tough, obviously, coming back. Really, yeah. I mean, when you say what's improved, it's, I don't know. We're actually in a good state right now. So
okay. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure there's someone will say something. It's still maybe. It's not about the game development process itself. It's very competitive, right? So I think now, because game development has become so accessible, you have everyone making games, and so competition is there. So it's harder, but that's not a what can you improve for game development in Australia kind of thing. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. And fifth and last question: what moment in your life in the gaming industry will you always remember?
Oh. One of the big ones was our very kind of our third game that we made, Siegecraft. It was actually our first year of going full time, forming a company, been building it, and we actually used another indie publisher ourselves back then. This is back in 2011, Crescent, and they were interested in the game, and so we signed up, and so that was really cool. And then they showed it to Apple, so it was a mobile game, looking at iOS. They showed it to Apple. Apple were really keen on it. They really wanted to feature it, and this is in 2011, and they essentially invited us to go over there to their campus, Cupertino, and essentially get access to the engineers and try to integrate some of the new Game Center functionality that was coming out in that version of the iOS. And so so I got to go over there to Cupertino, go into the Apple headquarters or campus, and just and it's only a couple of days, but that was cool. And then a few months later, when we released the game, we actually were able to get it wasn't the game of the week or editor's choice at the time. It was like another big banner kind of feature, and the game did really well. And I'll always remember that because it was a lot of time. We did a little bit of crunch for that. I mean, it was for ourselves, right? It was just me and my business partner, Aaron Grove, and so we did that. and it was a huge kind of validation, I guess, of all the effort and everything we put into it to see everybody enjoying it, and and it's sold really well, and essentially it was kind of the thing that kickstarted or kicked on Blowfish. We'd given ourselves a year, and seeing that success, and really we would not be here today where we've got 95 staff now, employees, and so we started with 2 people in my 2-bedroom unit. Right? We started on my dining room table, and that's where we were for the first year. And to go from there to where we are now, it's been amazing. And so I think that point there was kind of, I remember that part.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Ben, thanks so much for all these insights, and it's so great that you will be here in Germany soon at Gamescom, and we'll see you there.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. We have not, as a studio, not been to Gamescom before, so this is first time, so that'd be exciting.
It's the end of August, and that means it's time for Gamescom. This year, this convention is back in Cologne in Germany with so many games to play. There even will be lots of games from Australia, because that's the country Gamescom partnered up with this year. Normally at Open Indie, we portray indie devs from Europe, but we were curious on what games Australian indie devs are working on. I'm now here with Zilin. He's the project manager of Earthlingo, and with Ray Corrigan, he's the lead developer. They are at Gamescom this year from Australia. Hi, you guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Sarah.
So first question, describe a scene from Earthlingo from your current game and tell us what it's all about.
Let me start off there. So picture this. You're the player. You are put in the boots of an alien, sent to Earth, dropped in a rich open world map where every object, every building, every car, everything you see is interactive and is an opportunity to explore the language.
So I might jump into an example. So as an example, we have multiple levels which are all just different themes of words and sentences that you can learn. So for example, if you're in the house level, you may have like an apple on the table. So from that one object, you could learn the word for apple, you could learn the verb for eat, and you could learn the color, say red, if it's a red apple. And the idea is we're deeply linking the language with the context of the 3D world that you're presented with. But then also we're layering in popular gameplay loops that we're taking from non-educational games. We really want to focus on getting actual gameplay loops that feel like you're actually playing a game while you're learning a language. So in this house level, you're challenged with having to run around and you have to navigate around the world kind of like a platform or in interesting ways to move between objects as you're tested on your language skills. So that's the current state of the world now. It's a big 3D world to explore the language with, as Zilin said.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And your game is called Earthlingo, and your company is also called Earthlingo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So made an easy choice there.
Oh yeah, we thought the name fit, and why overcomplicate it?
Sure. So second question, why did you develop a vocabulary learning game?
You can take this one.
I'll start off with this. So it really just came from a need, and it was something where when I had that need, I looked out and I couldn't quite find what I was looking for out there. I think Zilin will talk a bit more about this later. So essentially, I had been in Japan before. I had learnt Japanese, and then I returned to Australia, and I had this. I was like, I want to keep up my Japanese. I want to, keep practicing words and practicing sentences and making sure I don't lose the language. But the problem with that is when you live a busy life, it's very difficult because finishing work and then getting out some flashcards and bringing out the textbooks to study a language is it feels a lot like work. So the idea was, well, what if we made something where it didn't feel like work? When you were able to revise the language. So it's difficult to get the motivation for flashcards and textbooks, but you always feel like playing a game at the end of the day because it's a really nice way to unwind. So the idea was, what if you could have that feeling of I'm relaxing, I'm playing a game, and you're having fun while you're doing it, and it just doesn't feel like you have to put in the effort to maintain that language or to learn a new language.
Right, yeah. So we had a look at the outside in the market, looked at what else was there. Ray specifically, because because he had this inherent interest in trying to maintain his Japanese skills. And he found, and then subsequently we found that the language learning games that were already out on the market that were available to us were very limited in scope, both in the sense that they didn't teach that much in the language and also had very limited gameplay elements within them. And what we wanted to do was to fix that. So we said, all right, so this is obviously something that we want. Let's go and try and make a complete gameplay experience that could also teach the players a meaningful amount of this language. And this is pie in the sky thinking. Ultimately, we want a player to be able to play this game, enjoy this game, and then jet off to another country in the world, walk into a bar or cafe, and strike up a conversation.
Cool.
Yeah, that's really our target. Like we're not aiming to get people to a native level of proficiency, because that's very difficult within the context of one game. But at the same time, we don't want. Right now, I'd say the game's good for practicing vocabulary, but we want to move beyond that. We want to get to the point where you can actually get a basic conversational level out of playing the game.
Will there be a Croatian language pack too at some point?
Of course they will say.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We've got 14 languages now. We're adding, actually Zilin's working with all the translators, working very hard on this. We're going to be adding another 14 languages next year. And eventually we're going to be opening it up so that people can submit their own languages. Because we don't want to limit this. We want to build this tool which can be used to learn any language, and in a fun and engaging way. We don't want to be just hitting the big languages and leaving these other languages alone, because often the more interesting languages are the ones that are like Georgian or something very interesting and a bit different that's not taught in every school.
True. So my third question is on what are you working on at the moment? But it's as you said, you are still working on Earthlingo.
That's correct. Oh, sorry, Zilin.
Oh, yeah. In respect to Earthlingo, as Ray said, we'll be working on adding additional languages as we try to make sure that we encompass as many users as possible. We're also working on some new gameplay elements as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you say which ones?
I can jump into that. So right now the game is good at teaching. It teaches vocabulary in, I'd say, a pretty effective way. And the gameplay loop is kind of similar to like a Simpsons Hit a Run or a Grand Theft Auto, where like the fun is in navigating around the world and platforming in an interesting way. But right now the game does lack a few things, which I would say like it's certainly a work in progress, because I wouldn't call it a complete game at this point. It doesn't really have a story or much progression through the game, and that's really what we're aiming to do. So we're working on an overarching story which will motivate the player, and then there are these malevolent robots which will be attacking the planet, and you'll be saving the humans from these robots. Again, using your language. So the idea is the more of the language you learn, the more powerful you get, and like you level up rather than your character leveling up. And that enables you to progress the story forward and to save the world from these robots which are attacking. So that's really what we're focused on now. And it's like, how do we find the fun, and how do we make the battle system with these robots both fun as a gameplay loop, but also integrating that language in a really core way and keeping it all in context at the same time. So that's really what we're doing now, is finding these new gameplay loops, building it all into a story, and making it so that you can really progress the game forward as you become more powerful in the language.
Great. Awesome. So fourth question, how is Australia for indie developers? Like, what's great, and where do you still see room for improvement?
So there's long been an indie game scene in Australia. However, recently we've seen a lot more institutional support come in. So of course, you know that this year Australia is the partner nation for Gamescom, and that is due to the hard work of Chapter Jen Schroeder from IGEA, which is the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, who have also worked with Screen Australia and Screen West to provide funding for individual games developers. I think we were mainly the beneficiaries of Screen West, but it was primarily Screen Australia who provided the overall games grant. So in that sense, we're seeing a lot more governmental support for the indie games industry.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, there was always like a local community, and game developers would get together, in a pub or in a restaurant or something. And Melbourne has a facility called the Arcade, which is a really cool place where a couple of studios are based, and it's a place where game developers come together and network and meet each other. And I believe the Australian organisation IGA, which deals with video games in Australia, I believe they're looking at expanding into other states with that. And so really, I'd say the main thing to improve would be it's really, really great to see all this government support come in for the games industry and trying to really start up these local game development communities. And I think really the improvement is just continuing to focus on that. And obviously you get the network effect as you get more studios starting in Australia and, more of this network of game developers to meet up with. So I think if they keep focusing on it, I think the community will naturally develop into something more mature than the more grassroots things that we see right now.
Mm-hmm. And what do you guys think should be improved?
I think the direction that we're seeing right now with support from Screen West for ourselves, Screen Australia, and Screen Victoria, I believe, has also lent support to some of the other Victorian indie dev studios. This kind of institutional support, this knowledge that's being provided, as well as the monetary budget, is a direction we're really happy with seeing the government taking. I think it shows that this is an important thing for the country to focus on, and we're happy that this is the direction they're going, and we want to, in terms of improvements, we just want to kind of see this continue.
Yeah, the last 6 months to a year have been very exciting with all kinds of new things happening. And before that, to be honest, we didn't see very much support, at least in Western Australia. But really, the last 6 months to a year has really been incredible. How fast things are moving, and how they're really getting behind this behind the game developer community in Australia. Yeah, something that would be good, and I believe IGA has interest in this. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'll let it out there. I have heard that they are interested in. So the Arcade is, as I mentioned, this office space in Melbourne where game studios can be based and where they can work together in a really tight-knit environment. I believe there's interest in expanding that to other states, and I think that would just be wonderful, because I've been to the Arcade in Melbourne, and it's really just a really fantastic place where you just meet all these interesting people working on really fun games, and you can really just network in a really effective way.
And that should be even bigger, you think?
Oh, I think, yeah. I mean, having one of those in Perth would be amazing. I don't know if that's on the cards, but I would love to see something like that starting to develop in Perth. So rather than just have, like, the grassroots is great, being able to go out and hang out with developers, but having like a place where you can base your studio and you can be around other studios and sort of share your knowledge and it really just feels like it'd be fantastic to have something similar to that in Perth or in other states in Australia too.
Mm. So fifth and last question, what moment in your life in the gaming industry will you always remember?
I think with our limited experience thus far, having just kind of this being our first game that we've been developing, we have dabbled in the industry before, but of course not to the level that we think we will definitely get to, especially coming to Gamescom later this year. But so far, our most memorable experiences do happen to actually be involved with the burgeoning community that have seemingly existed amongst the users of Earthlingo.
Yes, so like the online reaction and just the positive reactions we've had to the game, and I mean, as we said, the game is in a very early state. It's maybe 20 to 30% done, but we sort of put it out there like, hey guys, like, what do you think of this? We did a few Reddit posts, and we really just got this amazingly positive feedback, and that was just a really big moment for us because we were doing this little hobby thing and like, we can use this, like me and Zilin can use this to practice, and maybe my kids can use it to practice some French or something. But then, then we put it out there and we got this just amazingly positive feedback from people, and people were asking us to add new languages and, what if you change this and had this feature? And then people started streaming it on Twitch, which was incredible for us because it was completely grassroots. Like we weren't messaging people, and we're like, okay, well, people are actually, taking this on and making videos about it. And it was really wonderful to see, like, a Twitch streamer play the game, and you have a bunch of people joining onto their Twitch stream, and they're learning the language with this person while having fun and enjoying the game. And it really just made me think, wow, this is really something that we can do, and this is just this really great way to share both video games and our love of languages, with the community. And so really the online community has been amazing for Earthlingo. I was worried. I was like, oh, people are going to be mean, and they'll say, oh, your game's dumb and it's low poly, and it should be 4K, ray traced. But people were super friendly and happy, and I think they really understood, not just okay, this is what the game is now, but what can it become if we actually get it to that stage where as Zilin was talking about earlier, where you can play the game and then you can go to a bar and you can just strike up a conversation with someone from what you've learned in the game. So yeah, that's been the biggest positive experience for me. The community is so great.
It's always heartening, I would say, to read comments of someone actually playing the game, enjoying the game, and saying oh, I can't wait till next year when this game is fully developed, and that just makes us think, oh well, we better get developing then, just for you, Steam user 1045.
Well, we sort of released it as what it was, and I think if we hadn't had that positive response early on, maybe that's all it ever would have been, as this little project, and it would have essentially been a fun prototype of, hey, look how you can use a video game to learn some vocabulary. But yeah, with the positive response, and just we thought, well, we really should finish this off and turn this into what we want it to be. So yeah, it is out. You can download it on Steam. You can play it on mobile devices. But it's really and it's useful now. It's useful for learning vocabulary. But I would say it's not where we want it to be. It's not what we want to be finishing. What we want to end it with. And so really, we're aiming for end of next year for this to be, that pie in the sky idea that Zilin was talking about earlier, where it's this, this entire game experience, which has this really, an interesting story that you can progress through. And then at the end, you're like, oh wow, I just happened to learn a language while playing this game. And that's really end of next year on the horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. But the game is officially not in early access, right?
No, it is available on Steam as a regular game to download. And that's because we didn't know where we were going with it at the start. But now we're we've got to finish this thing off. Yeah.
Okay, but that's good to know for people that there's still stuff coming. Of course, normally in the early access phase, you expect that something is coming. But after full release, maybe not so much. But so people wait till the end of next year. There's still new stuff coming then.
Oh yeah, we're going to be pushing out a lot in the next few months and into next year.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks you guys so much for the short interview, and I hope you have fun at Gamescom and we see each other if you like.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having us, Sarah. See you at Gamescom.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll see you there.
So I'm now here with Craig Ritchie, the studio owner of Drop Bear Bytes, an indie game studio in Australia. They are currently developing a narrative-driven RPG called Broken Roads. Craig, nice to have you here on the show.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks very much for inviting me.
So first question, could you maybe describe a scene for us from your upcoming game?
Well, look, we've got a lot of locations based in Western Australia. They're all it's post-apoc and it's about 100 or so years in the future. So we have taken a little bit of creative license, but for the most part, we've put a lot of effort into making them as authentic and realistic as possible. We've just come back, in fact, on Friday from a trip to Western Australia where we drove through many of the towns and locations you'll find in the game and took many, many photographs, and our audio lead, Tim, recorded sounds, authentic sounds of what the places sound like at night and so on. And the major standout was Wave Rock. So this is a place in Western Australia, absolutely worth looking up online. It's a natural rock formation that is just, it's really, really incredibly beautiful. It's got a lot of historical, cultural significance for the area as well. We're going to have some secrets there that I don't want to go too much into, or else it could be spoilers for the game, but it's absolutely going to be in there. We have already got some level design of it. Perhaps what we can do is send you the work in progress as good as it looks at the moment, and you can kind of feature that if you want. But for the most part, it's we've been doing our best to recreate things as close to the actual locations as possible. So I first went to Western Australia in 2019, and I drove through the first half of the game, took about 1,000 photographs, quite literally, and we've been using those as references. And then we plan to go back in early 2020, but of course, COVID prevented that. And then we planned to go last year, and that it was still, we couldn't even travel within Australia. So we finally, almost 3 years later, been able to go back and view sort of the latter half of the game, and had the most amazing trip last week. And I'm super, super excited for not only Wave Rock, which is going to be really, really beautiful, but also some of the other locations that you can only learn so much from, Google Maps and image searches and that kind of thing. So yeah, Wave Rock was a highlight of the trip, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that comes together in the game.
Sure. Second question: why do you develop a traditional RPG?
Well, look, simply it's the genre that I love the most. I've been playing those kinds of games since the 90s, basically, starting with, I suppose, the Ultima games and the old Dungeons and Dragons games, and then in the later 90s, obviously Fallout 1 and 2 and the Baldur's Gate games and Planescape Torment, right through to, say, Disco Elysium more recently, Torment Tides of Numenera, the newer Wasteland games, the Pillars of Eternity, and the success of Kickstarter, and I think which did a lot to revive the traditional isometric RPG. So it's what myself and my co-founder Jethro, what we love to play the most, what many people on the team are incredibly passionate about, and what both our creative lead and our narrative director have also got really good experience on. All the way from Fallout 2 and Planescape Torment through to Torment Tides of Numenera as well. It's just what we love. I think that we can really tell great stories in Australia through this type of RPG that gives players a bit of freedom. It's not a hardcore action combat focused RPG, nor is it just a point and click adventure game. It lets you build your character as you go, and obviously super excited to see how players take to the moral compass, because that's what we feel we really bring in that's new, is put people in difficult post-apocalyptic situations and see how the characters they've made are going to handle that, from both from a puzzle solving and dialogue and relationships point of view, as well as the ethical and moral implications of some of the difficult choices that we're going to put them through. So yeah, a traditional style RPG also allows us to have that pulled back, elevated view of these beautiful locations within Western Australia. And yeah, like I said, it boils down to it's the genre that we love to play the most.
Yeah, it sounds fun. I can't wait. So, third question: how is Australia for indie developers? What's good, and where do you see some room for improvement?
Cool. Well, look, the main thing, I was touching on this with you earlier, is that we do have a lot of really good government support. There are many, many developers here, both experienced and graduates, newcomers who are just finishing up their courses in university. Australia used to be a real, solid part of the international game development scene with a lot of government support, and then that kind of went away for a while. And a lot of Australia's most experienced developers, were pulled away to major international studios in Europe or North America. But with the incentives, the rebates, the government funding, all those initiatives that they're doing to encourage investment in the sector in Australia, it's actually attracting top talent back. So, for instance, we've been able to hire a narrative director and a gameplay animator from Ubisoft Montreal. They're originally from Brisbane, but were in Ubisoft because that was just where some of the biggest and best games of the last few years were being made. But with the support of the government, we're able to have absolutely top tier talent both brought back into the country and emerge and keep them, because there was a point where these good developers would be snatched up once they reached a particular experience level. So I'm hoping that that's going to change now that the government is once again identifying the value of investing in digital games as an export, and that Australia can be, one of the best, if not a leader in this industry. So, we have a lot of talent. We have really good support. We've got all the, the infrastructure and so forth that one needs. We've got quite a bit of experience spread around through different studios, a very, very strong indie scene over here, as well as a few, triple A studios, or triple A like maybe double A or triple I, depending on how you define these things. Studios doing some really, really good, high profile games, both on console and PC, and as well as mobile titles. So, it feels like we're riding a bit of a positive wave here that makes a change from, 10, 15 years ago, or what the last decade or so have been like. So in terms of room for improvement, I mean, one of the big things is we're so far from everybody, so we don't always get to go to, Gamescom and, international PAX events and so forth. There's nothing really that can be done to improve that other than to continue having the kind of government support or publisher support that allows us to travel and get to these events and show off our games in person. But other than that, I really think we're on a very, very good track to see really cool, really inventive and original titles coming out of the indie scene, as well as establishing larger, major AAA studios that don't lose their talent to bigger ones overseas, thanks to the recent spate of government support that's been coming in.
Mm. And now for Gamescom, you've got a chance to go. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we're super, super excited about that. Yeah.
Final question. What moment in your life as an indie dev will you always remember?
Well, I mean, there's been so many, worked in a few game studios before taking the plunge to start my own. And that was a daunting thing in itself. And there's been a lot of really key standout moments, including the first time we revealed the game and released our trailer in October 2019, and just to see people's reactions and comments was amazing. And then, a week later, we showed off the game at PAX 2019, and to see people playing and to see the reactions on the faces of people who would just like kind of walk by and stop and like stare at our trailer playing, recognizing that perspective, recognizing the dialogue system, just going, oh wow, like this is that traditional RPG that I love. You could see some people just like walk by, they have a look, they keep going, they want to get to the Xbox stand or see the new Call of Duty game. Great, no problem. But those that our title appeals to, those players who have the same passion for this kind of game as we do, you could see them stop, like almost entranced, and look at our trailer and go like, wow, this is singing to me. This is games that, reminds me of games that I loved 10, 20 years ago. And you could just see how it would attract a particular type of player. So that was an incredibly memorable moment for us.
Oh, that's great. Oh, Craig, I wish you all the best for your game. I can't wait to play it. And yeah, we'll see you at Gamescom.
Fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Australia is cooperating with Gamescom this year, and that made us Open Indies curious. What indies are there in Australia, and what is it like there? I'm now here with Jonathan Bradley. He's the art director of Toast VR. Johnny, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you guys made Richie's plank experience, where you're standing in VR on a plank 80 stories high. That was really, really scary when I played it. I had to close my eyes, to be honest.
Yeah, you're not alone. A lot of people end up doing that.
Yeah. So first question, on what projects are you currently working on? And maybe describe a scene from your current game.
The game I'm currently working on is unannounced, so I can't really go too much into it. But narrative focused would be the best way to describe it, which is a shift away from the previous title, which is individual focused. This one actually has a story and has characters. Of course, it's in VR as well, and drawing on previous experience from RPE. I'm afraid I can't really go too much more into it than that. You'll have to wait till it's more announced.
Okay. Second question, why do you all focus on VR games?
I don't really have a definitive way of describing it myself. I'm quite new to VR, I have to say. Richard, who started the studio with Tony, they would probably have a more definitive answer, but I think it's just the way you can... It is the future of the way technology is going in some ways. Like the way they put it, I think I like the way they had their story, why they started the studio, is they went to like Japan on the honeymoon and played some VR and came back and they're like, wow, that is just mind-blowing when they played it. But like, we have to kind of, get involved in this because it's where everything's going. And just the way, you put in a headset and you enter a whole new world and it changes how you feel and has lots of applications for, I guess, psychology as well as gameplay. Like RPE is a perfect example of some people get very freaked out when you go on the plank and you put the story drop and afraid of heights. Other people can just walk off the edge and be like, it's just, it's not real, it's fake. But I've seen plenty of people with sweaty hands and, trembling and, my parents, they don't want to go on the plank. They just go up to the lift and they go straight down again. I'm like, nope, that's good. I don't need to go out and do that. So it's quite surreal in itself. There's an amazing experience to be able to give people. So, I guess to sum that one up, it's just giving people new experiences and new horizons, because you certainly don't get that vibe when you're not in VR. You don't get scared of heights. When you're in there and delighted, you're more amazed. It's probably just a more impactful kind of experience when done right. It is quite tricky to develop for VR because there's so much more that goes into it. In some ways, you have to just consider things from 360-degree angles. You can't direct people with the usual tricks of like focusing the camera or that kind of stuff. And so, developing for it can be entirely new experience, and you have to kind of rethink how you're approaching stuff, which is a fun challenge. Can be very frustrating at times, but also it's quite fun at the same time. And I think we see movie makers also have the same thing when they go and make a movie in VR, and all of a sudden you can't focus the camera in a certain way for a player or a viewer to look at, but instead you have to kind of capture their attention with a sound or some animation or a flickering light or something else.
Third question, how is Australia for indie devs? Like, what's good about it, and where do you see room for improvement?
I think it's pretty good. There's a few studios popping up now. Australia's a very big country that's obviously spread out between many thousands of kilometers. Lots of others. I think the geography defines Australia more than many other countries, because everyone's quite isolated in some way from each other physically. Like, there's 5 or 6 major cities. There's lots and lots of towns and lots of people in between, but there's 5 or 6 major cities spread throughout the entire country, which is a continent in itself. And so you don't get to meet people face to face, so you go to the meetups so often. Like, you can't just drive an hour or 2 hours, and it's a totally different kind of chapter in a way. I say chapter, thinking, I don't know how you'd say that for thing, but like in Brisbane, you get to see the people in Brisbane or the Gold Coast, but then unless you fly for a couple of hours, you're not going to meet people in Sydney or Melbourne. And many indie devs are split between Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria, the different states. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, because you don't be able to get together as much. And the global financial crisis hit Australia, as everywhere, pretty bad with studios. So Brisbane had a lot of studios before that happened, like 8. And I was one of the people, graduated during that year, and I was like, 7 studios shut down within a year. So kind of drained the talent very fast from the area because there wasn't as many opportunities. But I think that's growing. It's changing a bit more now, and most opportunities are more down in Sydney or Melbourne. But they're kind of more the bigger studios are down there. But then in Brisbane and Gold Coast, there's a few more kind of small ones popping up every now and again, which is nice to see. And I'd say it's kind of like a fairly tight community for people getting to know each other, because you just run into the same people over and over again if you go and work in one studio, go into another, which is always really nice. Where I see like room for improvement, there's always just government subsidies help a lot get studios off the ground, because obviously it can be quite expensive building a game. It can be quite cheap in some ways, but it can also be quite expensive if you want to expand upon the game. So subsidies always help with that and give people incentives. That's generally how industries grow, I think. And I think like Victoria's seen that. Like Melbourne had probably the biggest incentives for a while, and they also have some of the biggest studios down there. So it, pretty much direct correlation, really.
So there's definitely more needed, like more funding and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of money can be made in games. It's obviously not always about the money, but it's what makes things drive and go around. And I think some people, like governments, are kind of waking up to it a little bit slow. There's still definitely the stigma of like, oh, you're just games, just messing around, not doing anything serious or real. And you're actually like, oh, hang on, the games industry is as big as the music industry and the film industry combined together. It's even bigger. So like, oh, there's a lot of potential for that. And there's a lot of interesting designers in Australia, different way of looking at things sometimes. So a lot of potential for people to kind of people just need to get their foot in the door, really, which is a classic case. And to do that, it's really helpful when you can be around other people who have been doing things for a while, because there's a difference between getting out of uni and starting your own game versus more experienced people getting together, because you just don't have to make the same mistakes over and over again in that way, and people can learn from each other.
Yeah, cool. So final question, what moment in your life as an indie dev will you always remember?
I would say, well, it's probably not indie specific, but recently going to GDC was something I'll always remember. So that was nice. Obviously, it's always good to go to the big conferences and meet other like-minded people. And I hadn't been to America before, so that was really interesting. But being like an actual kind of more games focused on, well, GDC is games focused, but being more individual towards indie is just seeing when creations come to life after you've built them, bricked them, and given them to an animator, and then animators animated them. You're like, oh, this is really cool. It's actually moving. And then maybe like you develop further and put it in the game and add the systems, components, and controllers. And it's like, oh, now I can actually control my own character. And then kind of playing around with it. And it's like, wow, it's actually all starting to come together. All the plan, all the design, all the work. And then you can, after getting that's great. And then iterating on that even further is also really rewarding. And you're kind of thinking, oh, okay, now we can tweak and refine it and make it better. You can upgrade it and replace the character, the model, or the FBX, and it pops back into existence with a new design or some new colors, and it looks fresh. And you're like, wow, this is really quite addictive in a way. It's like building something greater than yourself. Just coming together as a team is always really good. It's kind of quite a generalized thing, so it's not a specific moment. It's just always the first time it happens is amazing, and then I'd say that's also just the same thing which makes me get back into games more and more, is that real-time feedback and being able to play with your own creations and build up that kind of stuff.
And now I have a special question, because you told me you play guitar and you're taking lessons. You mind playing something?
I actually left my guitar in the other room, so I have to go get it.
If you like.
Yeah. Okay. 1 moment. Okay, well, I'm not sure how well this will record, but we can have a go.
Yeah, sure. Let's try.
Thinking before what could I play? It's quite a nice little acoustic guitar thing from The Last of Us Part 2, which is kind of quite nice. Probably end up butchering it, but we'll see. How's that? Can you hear that? Okay. still practicing and playing, but yeah.
That was awesome. Thanks so much. Oh, you play really, really nice. Really cool.
Thanks. Definitely lots of room for improvement, but yeah, it's good fun.
For me, it sounds awesome. Sounds great. You're also playing sometimes music for your games or something? Or are you planning to?
Not yet. That would be really cool. Playing mostly just guitar, but yeah, I like jamming along with friends and making soundtracks. Music technology is a huge other avenue of stuff, which I'd love to play an instrument and somebody else develop it further, because I just don't have the time at the moment to learn all the ins and outs of putting everything together. It's definitely something I'll get into later though. But for now, yeah, just have to keep it easy.
Sure. Well, Johnny, thanks so much for all these insights. And yeah, we are very excited what project you are announcing soon. And yeah, keep us updated.
Oh, no problem. I'm really excited to show everybody what we've been working on. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Keep on playing guitar. It sounds awesome.
Will do. Cheers.
So at this year's Gamescom, around 37 studios are flying to Germany from Australia to attend at this great gaming event. And one of them is We Made a Thing Studios. I'm now here with Tom Phillips and Jeremy Kelly-Bakker, and their upcoming game is called Box Knight. It's a action RPG roguelike. Hi, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So first question, could you describe a scene for us from your game Box Knight and tell us what it's all about?
A scene. Yeah, so as you said, it's an RPG action roguelike, but so Box Knight takes place in a cursed office tower where you have to fight your way through fantastical abstractions of all your most toxic and depressive co-workers in your quest to fight your way up the tower and beat up the CEO who banned Friday night beers and brought this curse upon your workplace. So it's very sort of cartoony and over the top, and so as you're playing the game, we want it to be just as sort of bombastic and loud and silly as possible. Lots of little gags always going on in the background, but also have it feel fast-paced and replayable as well. So yeah, it's a very obnoxious game, but hopefully entertaining and silly and attention-grabbing as well.
And release is planned for October?
And do you want to go, Jez?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, so we're aiming for early access in October. And the plan is to, from that point, continue to roll out sort of content for the game and do sort of regular updates as it slowly kind of heads towards that 1.0 release, which would hopefully, if all goes well, be first quarter next year. But all eyes are on the early access at the moment in October.
Okay. Awesome. Second question. Is it true that you're normally a film production company?
Yes, that we established in 2017. So both Jez and I are over 10 years in the film industry in both different sort of respects. I came from sort of a more writing and development and producing side, and Jeremy came from a high-end visual effects side. Hence, a lot of the art and assets and crazy animation in the game is very much all Jeremy. But yeah, so we established in 2017 and worked across film, TV, commercials, for the past 5 years now. So yeah, that's very exciting. But we always saw a wonderful crossover between film and game.
Mm-hmm. How's that?
Well, I think it always for us comes back to the project and what the right format for a project is. And I mean, we always wanted to work across lots of different things. We saw the media landscape as a whole was obviously changing, and we wanted to make sure we were ahead of things and we were across things like tech and basically technology that helped us tell these stories. So we were one of the first in Australia across virtual production. So definitely out of South Australia, I think we're the first short film that used the Unreal Engine to produce sort of a live action narrative short. And obviously The Mandalorian sort of got that all very, very sort of hyped in the industry. But we always saw more of a crossover with narrative and story. And Box Night was an idea that started in post-production on one of our other projects that we kind of wrote down. And we wrote it down as an animated series to start with. And it wasn't until speaking to a game developer who was literally next door to our office at the time. And they were like, have you thought about looking at game for this? And we were obsessed with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game at the time. Very old, wonderful arcade game that still kind of holds up. And we were like, we'll do something really simple and we'll do it quick. And that was, I think, 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago at least.
Yeah, we were like, quick project, in and out. Turns out it's a total lie. So
yeah. So but we always knew we wanted to work in games, but it had to be the right time. It had to be the right project. And Box Night just sort of transitioned well. And it did start as a joke, and it's just kind of ballooned from there to something obviously we spent a lot of time and effort, and we're just incredibly proud of and really excited to see where it is at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And that's your very first game, Box Night, right?
Technically, yes. We did do a little augmented reality companion game to one of our web series, Lucy and Dick, which we never fully released publicly, but we did a closed beta that we probably will eventually release, and probably near the end of this year, actually, because we'll be doing a bit more of a run of that kind of content. But that's very much, yeah, I wouldn't even call that a game. More so, it is a companion piece to the series. What do you think, Jez? Is that the best way to describe that as an app?
Yeah. Well, we because all the projects that we do have a lot of high concept to it. So we do a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi. We lean into that sort of visual effects skill set quite a lot. And for the show that we'd made, Lucy and Dick, it was all about a talking, floating, animated robot, with a girl. And the actor that we sort of got to do that, a guy called Aussie Man Reviews, has just this like wonderful foul mouth and can swear in the most amicable, friendly ways possible. So we had this very, very rude robot, and we were like, well, let's put it in an AR app, and you can float around, and he'll hurl abuse at you, and you'll poke him in the face, and he'll get annoyed, and you can take photos with him. And it's a little bit silly, but the character is called Dick, so he's our digital intelligence companion. But because you can take photos with him, you could take and share your dick pics with people. And so you could take your photos with Dick and be like, share your dick pics with us, which is, playing with fire a little bit there, but, it made us giggle at the time.
Me too. It's great. So third question, how is Australia for indie devs? What do you think is great, and where do you see room for improvement?
That's a really interesting question. I think there's a big groundswell of support that's happening again now. There was quite unfortunately during the global financial crisis, we saw, particularly in Australia, a lot of games companies shut down. And so there was this entire generation of developers that kind of moved out of the country. They went to much bigger companies overseas, and it's sort of the Australian games industry, as far as I'm aware, is going through something of a bit of a renaissance right now, as this next generation of devs are sort of finding their feet. And, that the government organizations are also catching on as well, where they're seeing it as more and more of a legitimate business. And so there's some really, really good initiatives that have kicked off, like, various sort of startup funds and, ways for people to sort of raise money for their projects to get those prototypes and those alphas together. So, yeah, I think since we sort of started Box Night, which was fairly early on in a lot of these things, sort of these institutions kind of catching on, in the last 3 years, the amount of opportunities interstate and then federally has grown quite a lot and is getting a lot more press. So I think we're sort of just at the beginning of seeing I think a pretty big expansion in the Australian games industry. So it's an exciting time to sort of be finding our feet in this space.
Yeah, and I think the follow-on from that, I mean, like you mentioned at the start, Sarah, was like we're one of a handful, actually a couple of handfuls of companies going over to Gamescom that's really been made available to us because of the support from our government. And, that's just ridiculously exciting to have that level of support and probably confidence that taking us across to a place like Gamescom with such a spotlight and such a such a reach is really exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of that in the future. But yeah, from our perspective, we're just incredibly stoked and kind of humbled to be a part of that group of incredibly talented devs that are going over, because there's some pretty damn exciting games in that bunch. So yeah.
Well, there's people that are going along with our sort of cohort that we are just like legitimate fans of, like not even sort of, what do you call it, sucking up at all, like people whose work we really, really admire. So the opportunity to spend some proper time with them, pick their brains and share stories and stuff, like we're really, really psyched to be able to actually be getting some one-on-one time with people whose work like we aspire towards. It's such a privilege.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. Sure. Still, is there something you would wish for? Something that where you say, well, Australia need to change in that sort of way?
Yeah, no, you go, Jess.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I think because, Australia did have that very sort of unfortunate, lag in shutting down of companies. I think what we're starting to see now are the larger companies moving back. We're seeing sort of the more sort of established, the sort of larger corporations getting a bit more of a presence back in Australia. And so, look, I think what would be that we'd love to see change, and I think is already slowly changing, is more direct face-to-face, what we're looking for, opportunities to interact and collaborate with some of these people and build relationships. Like being in Australia, we are, and it's the same for film as well, we are quite isolated from the wider industry. And, so there's opportunities that might present themselves in Europe or America that we simply don't have here, just because of that face-to-face access and that ability to build trust and, a rapport and things. So yeah, I think seeing larger organizations here that can enable the smaller teams would be very exciting.
Sure.
Yeah. I think at that top end, that's spot on. But I think, the interesting thing, and I know a lot of game devs would go through it, but it's sort of that awareness from public and the acceptance from, I guess, the general public that it is a very, very legitimate and a ridiculously growing industry. So it is interesting. Like, we come from a very small town or city in Australia. And it is interesting to speak to a few general public, and when they ask what we're working on, if we're talking about a film project, there is somewhat more of an acceptance. But as soon as we start talking about a game, it's like, oh, okay, that must be a little bit of fun. Whereas we're very much seeing, the model of games and devs, and like it's a faster growing industry. So I think it's really exciting to see. Well, I think the people in power are very much seeing that, and it's moving that way. So that trend is looking good, and something we're pretty pumped about.
So my fourth and last question: what moment in your life in the gaming industry will you always remember, or is that moment maybe still to come?
Probably still to come, but we've got a few little bits and pieces. Tom's got a good one.
Yeah, like on that, like, well, I guess we've produced content for over a decade, and sort of worked our asses off, put stuff up on the screen, and watched it with audiences. And I think with film, I've never truly enjoyed sitting down and watching our work with an audience. It's always, because it's quite a watching cinema, TV, it's somewhat a passive experience, whereas game dev and playing a game is very active, and what you're creating as a developer and the storyteller from the game side of things is basically you're giving them the sandbox, and they're the ones who are going to explore it. And I think now that we've got the game to a point where it's looking good, it's playing really nice, and we've got to get it in the hands of some public, watching them play it has been like truly groundbreaking, because it's enjoyable, which is something I haven't, as a creative, haven't really, like, it's always nice to having written and having created, but the actual process of sitting down in a cinema, watching your work with other people is tough. But the game side of things really did pop for us. And it was just crazy to see how, people kind of unlock what you've made and make it better. And that process and that sensation was something I wasn't ready for. And it definitely took me by surprise.
Yeah, to have people sort of interacting with your content and also exploring it in a different way and finding different patterns and rhythms and things that you never even thought of before. Again, with content and TV and film and stuff, it's such a curated thing, and you've controlled every little aspect of it. Whereas this, like, there's just a degree of randomness and chaos that you can't account for. Like that player input, it becomes like legitimately entertaining. And as Tom was saying, the anxiety that comes with presenting a film just wasn't there in the same way as it is with presenting a game. Like it was quite a joy to see people laughing and playing around and being grossed out by the big splats and, making sounds when they do a really cool move. And like, it was such an interactive, fun experience.
Yeah, cool. So you guys, thank you so much for the interview and for being here. And it's really great that you're coming to Gamescom this year.
Cheers, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Cheers, Sarah.